I stepped off the transport plane onto American soil, the air thick with the scent of jet fuel and distant rain. My boots hit the tarmac with a thud that echoed through my bones. After 18 months in the dust-choked valleys of a classified theater, where every shadow could hide a threat, I craved the quiet of home. Not the barracks or the command posts, but the real home. The one with creaking porches and my grandparents' voices calling me in from the fields. The drive from the base was a blur of highways turning to back roads, the kind that wind through forgotten towns where time moves slow. My uniform was stowed in the duffel, replaced by civilian clothes that felt foreign on my skin. Lieutenant General Elena Vargas, that's who I was now. The only woman in my branch to hold 3 stars, commanding operations that shifted maps and saved lives. But here, in this rural stretch of Virginia, I was just Ellie, the granddaughter who sent letters and wired money when deployments allowed. The old farmhouse should have appeared around the bend, its weathered siding glowing under the late afternoon sun. Instead, a skeleton greeted me. Charred beams jutted like broken ribs from a mound of ash and rubble. Smoke still lingered in the air, faint but acrid, clinging to the trees that had watched over the place for generations. My heart slammed against my ribs. I slammed the rental car door and ran toward the ruin, boots sinking into the softened earth. Grandpa's truck sat untouched nearby, its paint blistered from the heat. The barn stood intact, but the house, the heart of it all, was gone. I knelt in the debris, fingers sifting through soot-covered remnants. A shard of Grandma's favorite teacup caught the light, its floral pattern mocking the destruction. Who did this? The question burned hotter than any fire I'd seen overseas. Neighbors had gathered at the edge of the property, their faces etched with pity and something darker, fear maybe. Old Mr. Harlan shuffled over, his cane tapping the ground. "Ellie," he said, voice rough from years of tobacco. "We tried to stop it, but those boys, they came with torches and threats. Your folks are at the motel in town. Safe, but shaken. Thugs," he called them, local muscle hired by someone with greed in their eyes, land developers sniffing around the acreage, wanting to turn family soil into strip malls. They didn't know I was coming back, didn't know who I was. My hand instinctively reached for the sidearm I wasn't carrying. In the Army, threats had clear protocols. Here it was personal. I stood, dusting ash from my knees, and felt the weight of my rank settle like armor. They had messed with the wrong family. The motel room door swung open to Grandma's frail arms wrapping around me. "Ellie?" she whispered, her voice cracking like dry leaves. "We thought you'd never come." Grandpa sat on the bed, his weathered hands clasped tight, eyes distant. "The fire took everything," he said. "Photos, letters, the quilt your mother made. But we're alive." I held them close, inhaling the faint scent of lavender from Grandma's shawl. Alive, yes, but the fire had stolen more than wood and memories. It had ignited something in me, a resolve forged in command tents and battlefields. "Tell me everything," I said, pulling up a chair. And they did. The harassment started months ago. Notes demanding they sell. Tires slashed. Then the blaze, set in the dead of night while they slept at a neighbor's after the first threats. The sheriff's office had come and gone, filing a report that gathered dust. Arson, they said, but no leads. Too busy with other calls. I listened, my mind cataloging details like an after-action review. The thugs were known around town, low-level enforcers for a developer named Harlan Crow. Crow wanted the land for a shopping complex, backed by shady investors. They had underestimated the old couple, thinking isolation made them easy prey. But they hadn't counted on me. The only grandchild, the one who left for West Point and climbed ranks while bullets flew. My deployments had kept me away, but my checks had kept the farm afloat. Now, those same hands that signed orders for airstrikes would sign their downfall. I kissed Grandma's forehead. "Rest now," I said. "I'll handle this." Outside, the night air cooled my skin, but inside, Fury simmered. I pulled out my phone, dialing contacts from the Pentagon, resources I could mobilize discreetly. Military intelligence didn't stop at borders. If these thugs thought burning a house ended it, they were about to learn the cost of targeting a general's blood. Memories flooded back as I drove through the town, streetlights casting long shadows on familiar storefronts. This place had shaped me, its red clay earth clinging to my childhood like a promise. Grandpa teaching me to shoot cans off fence posts, his calloused hands steadying the rifle. Grandma's kitchen, alive with the aroma of apple pie and stories of ancestors who tilled the same land during wars long past. I was 9 when I first felt the pull of duty. A storm had ravaged the barn, lightning splitting the sky like artillery. Grandpa didn't wait for help. He rallied neighbors, hammers pounding through the night. "Strength isn't in muscles," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's in standing when others fall." Those words echoed in basic training, in promotions earned through grit. The farm was more than property. It was legacy. My parents gone too soon in a car crash, leaving me to grandparents who raised me as their own. No siblings, just me. The only heir to stories whispered by firelight. I left for the academy at 18, uniform crisp, heart heavy. Promises to return, to protect what they built. Deployments stretched those promises thin. Afghanistan, Iraq, classified ops, where days blurred into nights of strategy and loss. I rose fast, commanding brigades, then divisions. 3 stars pinned in a ceremony where brass shook my hand, unaware of the rural roots fueling my fire. Letters from home kept me grounded. Grandma's handwriting looping tales of harvests and holidays. But the last ones hinted at trouble. Strangers lurking, offers to buy turning to pressure. I wired more money, thinking it would hold the line. Now, seeing the charred remains, guilt twisted like smoke. I should have come sooner. Parked outside the motel, I stared at the stars, clearer here than in any war zone. Grandpa's voice from earlier replayed. They said if we didn't sell, we'd regret it. Torches lit the night, flames devouring the porch first. We barely escaped. His eyes had glistened, not with fear, but resignation. That fueled me more than anger. Resignation had no place in their story. Not while I breathed. I researched quickly on my phone, pulling up public records. Harlan Crow, real estate mogul with a trail of lawsuits. Shady deals, coerced sales. His enforcers, a crew led by a man named Jax Reed, ex-con with a rap sheet for assault and intimidation. Local law turned a blind eye. Pockets lined, perhaps. But federal eyes saw clearer. My rank opened doors civilians couldn't imagine. A call to JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office, for legal advice on civilian matters intersecting military personnel. Then to CID, Criminal Investigation Division, for discreet inquiries. Arson on a veteran's family property? Grandpa had served in Vietnam. That made it personal for the Army, too. Dawn broke as I planned. The thugs thought they targeted helpless elders. They didn't know the granddaughter commanded forces that toppled regimes. Ignorance would be their undoing. I slipped back into the motel, kissing sleeping foreheads. "Sleep easy," I whispered. "The storm is turning." The town seemed to shrink under the bright morning light, its familiar streets feeling narrower and more confining than I remembered from my childhood visits. I pulled into the parking lot of the old diner on Main Street, the one with the faded sign that still read Joe's Java, even though Joe had passed away years ago. Inside, the place was alive with the hum of locals hunched over steaming mugs of coffee, the air thick with the smell of bacon and fresh brew. I slid into a worn vinyl booth by the window, ordering a black coffee that arrived strong and bitter, just like the ones Grandma used to make on the farm stove. It tasted like home, grounding me amid the chaos. As I sipped, I couldn't ignore the whispers rippling through the room. Heads turned my way, eyes lingering a bit too long. "That's Ellie Vargas, the one who went off to the wars," someone murmured from a nearby table. "Heard about the fire at her grandparents' place. Terrible thing." The mix of pity and curiosity hung in the air like smoke. Then, the waitress approached, a woman about my age with a name tag reading Sarah. I recognized her instantly, an old high school classmate who'd stayed in town while I chased horizons. She set down a refill with a sympathetic smile. "Ellie, I'm so sorry about your folks' house. That fire was awful. Those boys causing trouble around here are real bad news." I leaned in, keeping my voice low to avoid drawing more attention. "Tell me more about them, Sarah. Who are they? And what's their deal?" She glanced over her shoulder, making sure no one was eavesdropping, then pulled up a chair for a quick sit-down. "It's Jax Reed and his crew of thugs. They work for that big-shot developer, Harlan Crow. He's been buying up land left and right, turning farms into shopping centers and condos. For months now, they've been pressuring folks to sell, starting with phone calls and letters, but then it gets uglier. Your grandparents held out the longest. Everyone knows they're stubborn about that family land, but the threats turned real. Slashed tires, broken windows, and now this fire. The sheriff's office claims there's insufficient evidence to pin it on anyone, but we all know who's behind it." I nodded, mentally filing away every detail. Insufficient evidence? That wouldn't fly with me. Not after the precision ops I'd run overseas. Back at the motel, my grandparents were just stirring as I walked in, the room still dim with drawn curtains to block out the harsh sunlight. Grandma's eyes brightened the moment she saw me, though worry lines etched deeper into her face. "Ellie, dear, you look so tired. Those missions must take everything out of you." I hugged her tightly, feeling the fragility in her embrace that hadn't been there before my last deployment. "They do, Grandma, but I'm here now, and that's what matters." Grandpa, sitting on the edge of the bed with his morning paper, grunted in approval. "Good to have you back, kid. We've missed your fire around here." We settled around the small table with cups of weak motel tea that tasted like watered-down memories. As we talked, more details emerged about the harassment. Grandpa leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with anger. "That Jax fellow came by twice, strutting up to the porch with his tattooed arms crossed like he owned the place. First time, he said, 'Sell the land to Mr. Crow, or you'll regret it.' We told him no. This farm's been in the family for generations. Second visit, he got meaner. 'Sell or burn, that's your choice.' We stood our ground, but it shook us." Grandma added softly, "And last night after the fire, we found a note taped to the truck windshield. It said, 'Leave town now, or next time, it's you in the flames.'" My blood boiled at the thought. Threats against my elders, the people who'd raised me with stories and strength. In the Army, we identified and neutralized threats before they could strike twice. Here on civilian ground, the protocols were different, slower, but my resolve burned just as hot. "I need names, full descriptions, anything you remember," I urged. They described Jax in detail: tall, shaved head, a snake tattoo winding up his neck, always with a couple of burly sidekicks in beat-up trucks. I stepped outside into the crisp air, pulling out my phone to start turning the wheels. I had a contact at the FBI, someone I'd worked with on joint operations during my last tour, owed me a favor from a mission where intel sharing saved lives. "Run full backgrounds on Harlan Crow and Jax Reed," I texted. "Looking into arson, ongoing threats, possible extortion racket. Keep it discreet but thorough." The reply came almost immediately. "Affirmative, digging now." Military clout like mine opened doors to databases and resources that civilians could only dream of accessing. It felt good to leverage that power for something personal. By afternoon, I headed to the sheriff's office. My civilian badge clipped to my belt, not my Army one yet, but enough to command a baseline of respect in a small town like this. Sheriff Wilkins, a paunchy man in his 50s with a wary expression, shuffled through papers on his cluttered desk as I entered. "Miss Vargas, tragic what happened to your grandparents' place. The investigation is ongoing." I leaned forward across the desk, meeting his gaze without blinking. "Ongoing? That sounds a lot like stall to me, Sheriff. My grandparents were clearly targeted. Harassment, threats, and now arson. This isn't random. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my eyes. Well, we've got reports filed, but no solid proof ties it directly to Crow or his people. These things take time. Proof is coming, I replied firmly, my tone leaving no room for doubt. He didn't know my full rank yet, saw me only as a concerned relative back from service. That underestimation worked in my favor for now. As I left the building, a mud-splattered truck roared past on the street, slowing just enough for the men inside to leer out the windows. I caught glimpses of tattoos and smirks. Jax's crew, no doubt. They circled the block and came back around, pulling up closer this time. One of them, a stocky guy with a scarred cheek, leaned out and yelled, "Hey you! Tell the old folks their time's up. Pack up and get out before things get worse." Laughter erupted from the cab as they sped off. Fury surged through me, hot and familiar from battlefield moments. But I held steady. Discipline had won me wars. It would win this too. I quickly noted the license plate and texted it to my FBI contact. "Run this plate. Threat assessment needed." The response pinged back fast. "Registered to read. Known associates with criminal histories. Stay vigilant." Good. They were poking the bear without realizing how sharp its claws were. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the motel parking lot, I took up a quiet vigil by the door while my grandparents slept inside, unaware of the watch I was keeping. The night was still, broken only by the distant hum of traffic, until a shadow flickered at the edge of the lot. Footsteps crunched on the gravel, deliberate and approaching. I stepped out into the open, my voice calm but edged with authority. "Show yourself now." A figure emerged from the darkness, and there he was, Jax himself, his smirk twisting his face under the dim streetlight. "So, you're the granddaughter, huh? Cute. Didn't expect you to show up so soon. Tell your old-timers to pack their bags and clear out. Or else." "Or else what, exactly?" I asked. My stance relaxed on the surface, but coiled like a spring, ready for any move. He let out a low, mocking laugh, stepping closer as if to intimidate. "You'll see, sweetheart. Things can get real ugly real fast around here." With that, he turned and sauntered away into the night, his ignorance a shield he didn't know was cracking. He had no idea the woman standing before him had orchestrated precision strikes from high-level command centers, coordinating forces that dismantled far greater threats. They had messed with the wrong person entirely. The game was on, and I was already several moves ahead. As the night deepened around the motel, the flickering neon sign buzzed like distant gunfire from a forgotten battlefield, casting erratic blue and red glows across the parking lot. I sat in the rental car, parked in a shadowed corner with a clear view of the entrance, my eyes scanning every movement. Jax's bold visit earlier that evening had confirmed my suspicions. These thugs operated with a sense of impunity, thinking no one could touch them in this small town. But that kind of arrogance crumbled fast under real scrutiny, and I was about to bring the hammer down. My phone vibrated on the dashboard, breaking the silence. It was my FBI contact, the one who'd owed me since that joint op in the Middle East. "Preliminary hits on those names," the message read. "Crow is linked to at least 3 other arsons in the county over the past 5 years, never charged, but patterns match. Reed's on parole for assault. He's already violating terms with these threats. Digging deeper." "Good work," I texted back quickly. "Build the full file. Financials, associates, everything." It felt satisfying to see the pieces starting to align, like assembling intel for a mission briefing. With that momentum, morning couldn't come soon enough. I drove back to the burn site at first light, the air still heavy with the acrid smell of charred wood that clung to my clothes. Wearing gloves to preserve any evidence, I sifted through the debris methodically, just like I'd done in post-blast assessments overseas. Twisted metal frames from furniture, shattered glass from windows, and chunks of blackened timber scattered everywhere. The faint but unmistakable scent of accelerant lingered, gasoline most likely, poured along the foundation to ensure the flames spread fast. I pulled out my phone and photographed it all from precise angles, treating it like reconnaissance shots, close-ups of burn patterns, wide views of the overall destruction. Then, I zipped the files and sent them to a forensics expert I'd known from my Army lab days. Analyze for latent prints, residue composition, anything that ties to known arson methods, I instructed. His reply came swift. On it, General. We'll cross-reference with federal databases. When I returned to the motel around noon, Grandma was waiting by the window, her face pale with worry. She rushed over as I entered, her hands clasping mine tightly. Ellie, please, don't stir up more trouble. Those men are dangerous. They've already taken so much from us. I hugged her gently, feeling the tremble in her shoulders. I know, Grandma, but so am I. I've faced worse threats in places you can't even imagine. Trust me, I won't let them win. Grandpa, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, nodded slowly, a spark of pride in his eyes. She's got the fight in her, just like I did back in Nam. Go get 'em, kid. That simple affirmation swelled something deep inside me. Pride, yes, but also a fierce determination. I wouldn't let them down. This was my family, my roots, and I'd protect them with every tool in my arsenal. By afternoon, I decided to confront the source head-on. I drove to Harlan Crow's office downtown, a sleek building of glass and steel that stuck out like a sore thumb amid the rural charm of weathered brick storefronts and mom-and-pop shops. The secretary buzzed me in after a brief wait, and there he was, Mr. Crow, in a slick-tailored suit, rising from behind a massive oak desk with a forced smile. He extended a hand across the polished surface. Miss Vargas, please, have a seat. My deepest condolences on the loss of your grandparents' home. Such a tragedy. I ignored the handshake, staying on my feet to keep the power dynamic in my favor. Cut the act, Crow. We both know your men burned it down. The threats, the harassment, it's all pointing right back to you. His face flushed with feigned outrage, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. Those are baseless accusations, young lady. I've made fair offers to buy that land. Generous, even. Your grandparents are just being stubborn. Fair like the threats your goons delivered? Sell or burn, that sound fair to you? I countered, my voice steady and unyielding. His eyes narrowed into slits, leaning forward as if to intimidate. Careful, girl. You don't know who you're dealing with here. This town runs on my investments. One word from me, and doors close fast. I held his gaze without flinching, thinking to myself, oh, I know exactly who you are, but you have no idea who I am. I snatched his business card from the desk on my way out, noting it might hold fingerprints or other traces. Just more ammunition for the growing file. As evening set in, the threats escalated in a predictable but infuriating way. The motel phone rang shrilly, and Grandma answered before I could stop her. A raspy voice growled through the receiver. Listen up. Leave town tonight, or the old man gets it next. Grandma's face went ashen, her hand shaking as she hung up. Ellie? That was them. I took a deep breath, tracing the call mentally. It was likely from a burner phone, disposable and hard to pin without resources. But I had those resources. I immediately called my contact at CID, the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. Pull phone records on this number, I said, reciting it from memory. Military family targeted. Make it priority. Copy that, General. We'll trace origins and any patterns. Not long after, Jax's crew drove by in their mud-caked truck, hurling bottles that shattered explosively near the motel door, glass fragments scattering like shrapnel. Amateur intimidation tactics, but effective enough to rattle civilians. I stepped outside, phone already recording video and audio. They slowed down, laughing raucously. Run along, sweetheart. This ain't your fight, one shouted. The Army had taught me patience in high-stakes situations, but everyone has limits. I dialed the sheriff right then, keeping my cool. Sheriff Wilkins, This is Elena Vargas, reporting fresh harassment. Drive-by with projectiles at the motel. Plate number matches the one from earlier. He grumbled on the line, sounding reluctant. All right, I'll send a deputy over. But stay inside next time. On it? Make sure it's documented, I pressed before hanging up. Inside the room, my grandparents huddled together on the bed, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. Grandma's voice trembled as she pleaded, Ellie, please, just take us away from here. Somewhere safe, far from all this. I knelt in front of them, taking their hands. Not yet, Grandma. If we run now, they win. They get the land, and we lose everything we fought for. Strength comes from standing our ground, just like Grandpa taught me all those years ago with the storms and the harvests. Grandpa squeezed my shoulder. She's right. We've faced hard times before. Their trust bolstered me as I resumed my night watch from the window. Shadows stirred again in the lot, this time 2 figures creeping closer under the cover of darkness. Drawing on my silent takedown training from Special Ops, I slipped out quietly and intercepted them. One lunged, but I twisted his arm behind his back with a swift move, eliciting a sharp grunt of pain. Who sent you? I demanded, my knee pressing into his back for leverage. Jax! It was Jax, he gasped, struggling futilely. We were just supposed to scare him, break a window or something. I zip-tied their wrists with supplies from my duffel, then called the sheriff again. 2 intruders detained at the motel, trespassing with intent to assault. Deputies arrived quickly, cuffing the pair and hauling them away, their faces a mix of surprise and admiration as they looked at me. Who are you, really? One deputy asked, eyeing my efficient work. Just family protecting what's mine, I replied evenly. But inside, the general in me stirred fully awake. It was time to reveal the stars on my shoulder and turn this personal skirmish into a full-scale rout. Dawn broke over the horizon with a soft orange glow, piercing through the motel curtains as I stirred from a restless night of vigilance. The arrests from the previous evening were still fresh in my mind. Those 2 intruders I'd subdued in the parking lot had cracked under questioning almost immediately, spilling details that directly implicated Jax Reed as their boss. My phone rang early, vibrating on the nightstand. It was Sheriff Wilkins, his voice gruff, but tinged with a hint of triumph. Miss Vargas? Or should I say General? We've got those 2 singing like canaries. They fingered Jax for sending them, and we're building a case. But Crow? He's already lawyered up tight, claims insufficient evidence for the arson charge. I sat up straighter, the pieces clicking into place. Not insufficient for long, Sheriff. Keep pushing. I've got resources lining up. Not yet, I thought to myself as I hung up. This was just the beginning. My contacts were already humming with activity. The FBI dossier on Crow was growing thicker by the hour, revealing financial trails that linked him directly to payments funneled to Reed and his crew. There were patterns of similar arsons in neighboring towns, farms torched after owners refused sellouts, all benefiting Crow's development empire. Back inside the room, I decided it was time to confide fully in my grandparents. They deserved to know the full extent of who I was and the power I could wield. We sat around the small table, steam rising from fresh cups of coffee I'd brewed in the motel's tiny machine. Grandma, Grandpa, I began gently, there's something I need to tell you about my role in the Army. I'm not just a soldier anymore. I'm a lieutenant general, with 3 stars and command over major operations. Grandma's eyes widened in surprise, her hand flying to her mouth. Lieutenant General? Our little Ellie? Oh, honey, we knew you were doing important work, but this is beyond anything we imagined. Pride shone in her eyes, but it was mixed with a shadow of fear as she reached for my hand. That kind of power. Use it wisely, child. Don't let it change who you are deep down. Grandpa nodded solemnly, his voice steady. We're proud, kid. Always have been. But be careful. These folks play dirty. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. I will, Grandma. I promise. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice for what they've done to you." With their blessing, I made the call to the Pentagon that morning, using a secure line from my laptop. "This is Lieutenant General Vargas requesting support," I said to the duty officer. "Family of a high-ranking officer has been targeted, arson on their property, ongoing threats. Possible national security angle if it escalates to military personnel." The angle was thin, I knew, tying it to my status, but it was enough to mobilize resources and boost the investigation's priority. Affirmative responses came swiftly. Doors were opening. By afternoon, things escalated publicly. I arranged a press conference with the local news outlets, standing tall beside Sheriff Wilkins on the steps of the town hall. For the first time, I donned my full uniform, the stars on my shoulders gleaming under the sun. The media buzzed with excitement as cameras rolled and reporters jostled for position. "Lieutenant General Elena Vargas has returned home to find her grandparents' family farm destroyed by arson," the anchor announced. "Threats continue against the elderly couple. General, what can you tell us?" I stepped to the microphone, voice clear and commanding. "This is more than a fire. It's a targeted attack on innocent people. I've mobilized federal resources, and those responsible will face justice." Flashes popped like gunfire, and I knew Crow was watching from his office, his ignorance about my true power finally shattered. The story went viral locally, putting pressure on everyone involved. That night, the net tightened further. A raid on Jax's rundown trailer yielded damning evidence, torches, gas cans, even rags soaked in accelerant that matched the forensics from our farm. As deputies cuffed him, he snarled through gritted teeth, thrashing against the restraints. "You think this ends it, lady? Crow owns this whole damn town. He'll bury you." I stood there, arms crossed, meeting his glare without flinching. "Not anymore, Jax. You've messed with the wrong family, and the town's about to change owners." My voice carried the weight of command, the kind that had directed troops in life-or-death situations. He went quiet, the fight draining from his eyes. With the immediate dangers mounting, I relocated my grandparents to temporary housing on the nearby army base, perks of my rank that included secure quarters with all the comforts. They marveled as we drove through the gates, eyes wide at the orderly rows of buildings and saluting guards. "Ellie, this life you've built, it's humbling," Grandpa said, settling into a cozy armchair in their new suite. "Never thought our farm girl would command all this." But even as they adjusted, the fight brewed on. Crow, cornered, filed a lawsuit for defamation, claiming my press statements slandered his business. It was laughable, a desperate move. I forwarded it to JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office, who countered swiftly with motions to dismiss. A full federal probe launched, expanding beyond our case. The threats shifted then, becoming more subtle and insidious. Anonymous letters arrived at the base mailroom, scrawled with warnings. "We'll find you, no matter where you hide." I traced them through my channels, metaphorical fingerprints leading back to Crow's network, perhaps typed on office equipment. Evidence mounted steadily. Witnesses started emerging, emboldened by the publicity and my visible presence. Former victims from other towns came forward, sharing stories of coerced sales and nighttime intimidations. "Crow ruined my livelihood," one elderly farmer told me over coffee. "But seeing a general fight back gives me hope." Patterns became crystal clear: racketeering, extortion, a web of crimes ripe for federal charges. By evening, I held a debrief with my makeshift team over a virtual secure line, CID investigators, FBI agents, all coordinating seamlessly. "Arson confirmed as intentional," the lead agent reported. "Motive? Land grab for Crow's developments. We've got financial links, witness statements, charges are pending." Satisfaction grew within me as the call wrapped up. They had messed with the general's kin, underestimating the arsenal at my disposal. Repercussions were incoming, swift and unrelenting. The weeks following the arrests blurred into a relentless series of strategy sessions, each one feeling like a high-stakes briefing in a war room. I turned the nearby Army base into my makeshift command center, with secure conference rooms buzzing with calls and laptop screens glowing late into the night. My grandparents adjusted surprisingly well to life on base. Grandma found solace in the communal kitchen, baking batches of her famous apple pies for the soldiers, who gathered around with grateful smiles. "These boys remind me of you when you were young, Ellie, always hungry after a long day," she'd say with a chuckle, her hands dusted in flour. Grandpa, meanwhile, spent afternoons in the rec hall, sharing his Vietnam War tales with wide-eyed recruits. "Back in '68, we held the line against worse odds," he'd recount, his voice gravelly but animated. A sense of community formed around them, like an extended family they hadn't known they needed, shielding them from the storm raging outside. But beyond the base gates, tension mounted thick and heavy. Crow, sensing the walls closing in, rallied his allies, local politicians and business cronies who owed him favors. They leaned hard on Sheriff Wilkins, cornering him in private meetings. "Drop this investigation now," one councilman urged over coffee, his tone laced with warning. "Crow's developments bring big money to this town, jobs, taxes. You don't want to kill the golden goose." The sheriff relayed it to me later, sounding conflicted. "They're pushing hard, General, saying it's bad for business." I countered swiftly, leveraging my military brass. I placed calls to senators I'd briefed during deployments and officials at Veterans Affairs. "This is about protecting military families," I emphasized in one heated conversation. An elder veteran and his wife targeted arson threats. "We need federal oversight." Support swelled like a rising tide. Endorsements poured in, turning the tide. The media coverage went national. Headlines blaring, "Hero General fights back for grandparents' torched farm." Public outrage built online and in letters, Crow's company stock plummeting as investors fled the scandal. In the interrogation room, Jax finally cracked under the weight of evidence. Chained to the table, he sweated through his shirt as detectives played back witness statements. "All right, fine. I set the fire," he admitted gruffly, his voice breaking. "Crow ordered it. Said to make an example if they wouldn't sell." The taped confession was pure gold, irrefutable proof that sealed his fate. Crow was arrested the next day, agents storming his office in a dawn raid. Charges piled up. Fraud, conspiracy to commit arson, extortion. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk. "You've got the means to vanish," the magistrate said sternly. Crow's empire began to crumble. Assets frozen, projects halted, his once powerful network scattering. The threats peaked in desperation, culminating in a drive-by at the base perimeter one stormy night. Shots rang out, bullets pinging off the fence. Army response was swift and precise. MPs swarmed, capturing the shooter in minutes, a hired gun linked directly to Crow's payroll. "He paid me to scare you off," the man confessed later, adding attempted assault on a federal officer to the growing list of charges. My grandparents worried endlessly, Grandma's voice trembling over dinner. "Ellie, enough, please. Let's just walk away before someone gets hurt." Grandpa echoed her softly. "You've done more than we ever asked, kid." But I saw the endgame clearly now. Justice was nearing, and retreat wasn't an option. The final pieces fell into place with financial audits that revealed layers of embezzlement in Crow's books, shady transfers, cooked numbers. My wired money to the farm hadn't been misused, thank goodness, but the parallels stung, reminding me how close greed had come to erasing our legacy. My resolve hardened like steel. The climax brewed in the courtroom, where Crow stood defiant, pleading not guilty in a tailored suit that couldn't hide his pallor. Evidence was overwhelming. Documents, tapes, forensics, witnesses testified one by one. Former employees detailing orders, neighbors recounting threats. When my turn came on the stand, I wore my uniform crisp and proud, voice steady as I detailed the destruction. The fire didn't just burn a house, it torched generations of memories, all for profit, I said, locking eyes with the jury. They leaned forward, nodding subtly. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered in growing crowds, veterans saluting sharply, locals waving signs of solidarity. Our family was safe at last, the legacy avenged step by step. Trial day dawned under a stormy sky, heavy clouds mirroring the tension that had built over weeks of preparation. Rain pattered against the courthouse windows as I arrived, the air inside thick with anticipation. The courtroom was packed to capacity, reporters crammed into the back rows, locals filling the benches, and a cluster of veterans in uniform showing support for my grandparents' cause. Harlan Crow sat rigidly at the defense table, his once confident demeanor reduced to a sharp glare that darted my way as I took my seat. I linked hands with my grandparents, feeling Grandma's frail fingers tremble slightly in mine, while Grandpa squeezed back with quiet strength. "We're here together," I whispered to them. "No matter what, we've already won by standing up." The prosecutor built the case methodically, brick by brick, laying out the evidence in a clear, compelling narrative. First came the arson reports, complete with lab analyses of the accelerant residues that matched the gas cans found in Jax's trailer. Then, audio tapes of confessions played for the jury, Jax's voice crackling through the speakers. "Yeah, Crow told me to light it up. Make sure they got the message." Forensic experts testified next, detailing burn patterns that proved the fire was no accident. Witnesses followed in a steady stream, neighbors recounting late-night threats, former employees exposing Crow's pattern of coercion. "He said if we didn't push harder, we'd be out of a job," one ex-associate admitted under oath, his voice steady despite the defense's attempts to rattle him. When my turn came to testify, I stepped to the stand in my crisp uniform, the stars on my shoulders a silent testament to my authority. My voice remained steady and measured, honed from years of briefing rooms. "The threats started subtly but escalated to outright violence," I explained, detailing the anonymous letters, the drive-by shots, and the devastating fire that erased our family home. This wasn't just about land, it was a calculated attack on vulnerable elders, all for greed. The jury nodded along, their expressions shifting from neutral to resolute as I spoke. The defense tried to spin their tales, portraying it all as misunderstandings and coincidences. "No direct intent can be proven," Crow's lawyer argued passionately. "These were business disputes, nothing more." It was laughable, a desperate grasp at straws that the jury saw right through. Deliberations were swift, lasting only a few hours before the foreman stood. "Guilty on all counts," the verdict rang out. "Arson, conspiracy, extortion." Crow's face went pale as death, his hands clenching the table edge as bailiffs led him away in cuffs. Life in prison loomed as a real possibility, while Jax faced years behind bars for his role. Outside, cheers erupted from the gathered crowd, a wave of relief and justice washing over us. But for me, there was a personal reckoning still unfinished. Later that day, I visited Crow in the holding cell, the clang of metal doors echoing down the hall. He looked diminished behind the bars, his suit rumpled. "Why did you do it?" I asked calmly, standing just out of reach. He spat back bitterly. "Greed, plain and simple. Needed that land for the deal of a lifetime. Didn't know who you were, some army brat, I figured." I met his eyes without flinching. "Exactly. You messed with the wrong person, and now you'll have plenty of time to reflect on that." It wasn't about gloating, it was closure, a final acknowledgement of the power he'd underestimated. Back at the base, my grandparents hugged me tightly, their embraces warm and weary. "We're so proud of you, Ellie," Grandma said, tears glistening. "But it's been hard. Time to rebuild, to heal." Grandpa nodded. "You've given us justice, kid. Now let's make new memories." Months later, under a clear spring sky, the new house began to rise from the ashes on our family land, its frame stronger and more modern than the old one, with reinforced beams and energy-efficient windows that let in floods of natural light. Contractors hammered away, turning the scarred earth into a fresh foundation. While I oversaw the plans during my weekend visits from the base, my high rank allowing flexible leave when needed, my grandparents settled in gradually, their belongings unpacked into cozy rooms that echoed with familiarity. Grandma's stories flowed again over evening teas, tales of our ancestors' hardships that now felt like victories. "Ellie, this place feels like a new chapter," she'd say softly, her eyes twinkling as she arranged photo frames on the mantel. Grandpa would nod, adding, "We've rebuilt before, storms, floods, but this time, it's thanks to you, kid. You've given us more than walls. You've given us peace." I visited as often as duties permitted, sharing meals and walks through the fields, reflecting on the lessons etched into my soul. Power, I'd learned, could protect in ways I'd never imagined, but it was family that truly endured, unbreakable even by flames. Crow's empire dissolved completely in the aftermath. His companies liquidated, assets seized. The land he coveted preserved forever as community green space through legal trusts I helped establish. Neighbors and locals thanked me in waves, stopping by with baked goods or handwritten notes. "You stood up when no one else would," one elderly farmer told me during a town hall gathering. "Changed everything around here." But the true win shone in my grandparents' smiles, their faces relaxed and joyful, finally safe and cherished in a home that honored our legacy. If this story resonates with you, remember, strength often hides in the most unexpected places, waiting to be unleashed. Protect your own with everything you've got, because in the end, love always triumphs over fire and fear.